something to scream about.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Something to Scream About podcast. We're your hosts, Jordan and Cameron. If this is your first episode, welcome. We're pleased to have you. Thanks for the support on the last episode. That was episode 30 with Justin from Tala. That was awesome. Had some great feedback from that, and he shared some absolute knowledge bombs. We're at episode 31 today, and as you can see from the title, we're talking about how to write and record a song. So getting it from the initial idea, the conception, and taking it all the way through until you would send it off for mixing and mastering. But first, Cam, let's do some housekeeping. We want to talk about kind of what we've got coming up for the rest of the year, and we can just knock out a bit of our plans and what to look forward to. We're gonna basically start pushing out on our socials some new content moving forward and getting ready for the new year with plenty of releases. So you may or may not see a release this year, but certainly at the start of the year we're coming out strong. So really keep your eyes peeled on our socials and get excited, comment on those, and interact with us so we can talk and keep the dialogue going. So
we definitely have multiple different songs coming out. We have about 8 songs that are written. Doesn't mean that we're dropping 8, but we've got about 8 songs that we're like, okay, these are in the ballpark of what we want to get completely finished. And definitely next year it'll be a heavy release type of year next year. We'll be dropping songs very frequently. We'll also be gigging very frequently next year. That is the plan. And without dropping too much info, you know, some are going to have some features on them, and some are going to be that old school DV sound that you guys are used to, and it's going to be a very unique type of year, I think. I think it's definitely going to be the year that we're pushing the hardest, I would say.
yeah, for sure. So really exciting, and we appreciate any support you guys give us on that. Secondly, one thing I wanted to mention is that we're going to Good Things Festival again. If you remember from this time last year, we were talking about the same festival. And going to that. So this year, Limp Bizkit are headlining alongside Fall Out Boy, but we're not really going for Fall Out Boy, no offense. But yeah, we're going to go see Limp Bizkit. I don't think you've seen them before, have you?
No, they're literally the only reason why I've bought tickets.
Yeah.
Because, you know, growing up, their music was very popular, and it's pretty much what got me into metal alongside Slipknot and Linkin Park. They were the 3 bands that when I was a teenager, I was like, oh, this is really cool. I like this. So I was like, how often are they going to come to Australia? You know, they're getting older.
We thought they were done and dusted, really, and it was a nostalgia thing just to listen to them. But, you know, like you, I've been a fan for ages, so it's going to be so cool to go and see them do what they do. And it's new metal. It's our style. It's our thing. So
I Prevail would be dope as well. That's going to be really cool. I like their music as well.
They are so...
Even Slaughter to Prevail, I don't even really listen to them, but I just feel like, you know, they just go so hard. I wouldn't. That would be cool seeing a band just deathcore the whole time.
Yeah, that's exhausting. Go and see them shred themselves up on stage.
Yeah.
There's quite a few good bands playing, and we might go and check a few of those out. We're planning on taking the camera and doing a bit of a day out vlog together because it's just you and I going. So we're gonna basically take you guys and analyze a few things and showcase the day. So you might get to see that on YouTube if we come through with the goods.
Maybe we just try and convince people we're journalists and get some backstage.
All we need is like a little microphone and some fake media badges. Yeah, well, we'll get so many. Yeah, so that'll be fun. So stay tuned for that as well. Good Things Festival coming up this Sunday. But you'll see that on YouTube. If you're not over on YouTube, we've got plenty of content that's coming out, including clips from the podcast, but also tutorials and things about new software that's coming out, the way we do things, all of that.
I even did a poll the other day for the first time. So you actually have to have over 1,000 subscribers, I believe, or 500, either 500 or 1,000 subscribers to be able to do a poll. But if you're videos have a certain amount of outreach and a certain amount of comments and engagement on them, you can get them early before you have those subscribers.
Oh, cool.
And because our page has been doing so well, we have so many people commenting, mainly on my Scream video and my awesome. Vocal scratch video. Those ones have been blowing up with comments. That makes me feel amazing. Thank you guys.
Great.
And I always answer questions, which I think is helping the algorithm as well, because if someone asks a question, I'll reply to it. But yeah, so I did a poll on our YouTube channel, and people are also voting on that poll of what they want to see. So I think the one that won was they want a mixing tutorial on guitars specifically.
Okay,
so
cool.
that can come definitely in the next few days or weeks or so. I'll get onto that, and so be on the lookout for that, because this podcast is not, we're not going into mixing on this one. This is literally the getting to the point of mixing, because most bands, we realize after speaking to people in the industry and community and scene, that most people don't mix and master their own songs. Most bands just write it and then they just send it off for someone else to mix. So we're like, well, why don't we do an episode on that process of getting it up to the mixing point, and then we'll do a separate episode on mixing later.
Yeah, I think so. So we're going to cover our knowledge, our current knowledge at least, of how we go about writing and recording a song and getting it down from an initial concept, and then how that sort of comes together as a song, because it's not always the same as how it starts out, and then how we work on then taking that into the studio, or whether you're hiring studio space or doing it from home, and how to make sure that you've got all the pieces right and all of the sounds sounding as good as they can captured at the source, so that you can then present the best song for mixing. Because we mix our own stuff, and because we've mixed quite a few different types of music, we understand what it's like to get some stems or material that's just not ready for mixing, and it's hard to mix. It makes the song difficult, and you have to take shortcuts, and you have to cut corners and all sorts of things.
Or you have to get them to re-record, because it's literally unusable, and that's going to cost you and your band more money, because this sound engineer or mixing engineer needs to put more time into getting your stuff acceptable, as opposed to whether, which we'll get into in a second, getting your stems to the point that by the time you send them off to mixing, a lot of that work has been done. That'll save you guys a lot of money, especially if the sound mixing engineer is charging you like hourly as opposed to per mix.
Yeah, that's right. And there's so many simple things that you can do to make sure these stems are great, so that you can save this time and money. So hopefully this will, give you guys a bit of an insight as to how we do it, and then how you can maybe take some of these tips and apply it to your own situation. We're primarily talking about doing it from home and all in-house, because we have the ability to record and produce and do everything from here. But we'll try and talk about other scenarios as well as we go through.
Well, there's different levels of home studios. Like, I think most people, especially guitarists, will have a very, very, very basic home studio, being an AD converted audio interface, guitars, jacks, leads, and some sort of speakers, even if they're not studio monitors, some kind of computer speaker. And that's really all you need to get started.
Yeah,
really.
It is, yeah. Even just a pair of headphones and stuff, you don't even need the speakers to begin with. But
especially if you're not the one mixing, because you don't need all of the wide frequency range headphones and all of the, room acoustics. And, if you don't have the knowledge to do all that stuff, then you don't need the gear. It literally does nothing for you. If you're just trying to get the stuff ready to be mixed, then there's other things that you need to know just to get your stems at a high quality level right from the source, which is one of the biggest mixing tips I tell people when they're asking for tips on mixing, is like getting the source right, getting the sound right at the source, because trying to clear up a sound that has a bunch of frequency humming, and let's say if it's a vocal, if it's really boxy, if it was recorded, let's say they tried to put a towel over their head or like a blanket to try and, they think that's going to help with the acoustics or something. And then it ends up sounding really muffled. It makes it sound like the vocals like this, you know what I mean? Boxy and stuff like that. There's things we can let you know in this episode of how to get the best results. So
yeah, wicked. Cool. Well, let's start with writing. Let's start at the beginning. If because majority of the ideas start from you. If you're sitting down to write an idea, we've spoken a little bit about this before, because inspiration can come from different places, but is there any particular place that you start every single time with a riff or a drum pattern, or is there a specific way to start? Because in my view, I don't think it matters.
No, it definitely doesn't matter. Inspiration strikes when it strikes, and I think it's definitely different every time. So for me, I'm a pretty emotional person, and I like to, whenever I feel an influx of emotions, I like to direct that through music. So most of the time it'll be either sadness or excitement. Like they're my two most, just ADHD, like my kind of roller coaster of bipolar that we freaking deal with, of like being at the top of the roller coaster at the bottom. So, you know, the idea usually would start, I mean, it's different every time. Like sometimes it'll start with the riff because I'll just be like, oh, I just need to write a melody that is expressing, let's say, my sadness or something, and I'll just pick up the guitar. I don't care about tone. I don't care about plugins or any of this stuff. It's literally just composing the notes in the correct order and then expressing how I feel in that moment. And then I let the songwriting come later. A lot of my stuff is, a lot of the stuff I send Jordan, especially with Distorted Views, will be a 4 or 5 minute freestyle. And I'll just go through and I'll pick, oh, that was cool, that was cool, that was cool, that was cool. And it ends up turning into a full song. It's very sporadic and ADHD, I suppose. Like I don't sit down and go, I'm writing in C minor and my guitar is tuned to drop C and I'm going to use the Phrygian scale of that. No, I don't do any of that. I feel like the more music theory knowledge you know can almost put you in a box. You ever meet people that are really knowledgeable, but they're too knowledgeable?
Yeah, it limits you.
And it limits them, and they have to move within it. I just go, hey, this is how I feel, and I just put it out there.
Yeah, and that's like, when you're jamming and stuff, like obviously you need to have a basic as tone or something to be able to listen to, and you might write a basic drum pattern to jam along to, but then you're using your inspiration from songs that you know or like, or feelings or bands or certain styles of riffs, and then you're using that to like basically let it free flow out of you in a jam session. And you might collect a bunch of riffs and then go, that one really worked, or this one and this one go well together, or maybe I can transition into this type of part, and you'll kind of write out a draft idea, basically, So then...
most of it gets scrapped too. You just go, even if it sounds good. That's a big thing you got to realize too. It's like sometimes you'll write something that sounds cool, but just no matter how hard you try to incorporate it in the song's just not having it. It's like a puzzle piece that doesn't fit. It's still a puzzle piece and it might still look cool, but it's like this particular song structure, it's not fitting. So you kind of just, put it to the side and say maybe another song will come and I can use those chords or whatever in a new song.
Yeah, true. Not being so attached. We've spoken about that a bit before too,
definitely.
to the ideas. But then once you've got like with the ideas and stuff, once you've got them all coming in, often you can get into this state of flowing and the ideas just come one after the other and you can kind of write them down. It feels like the song's writing itself. That's kind of like this flow state of writing. I reckon it's important to get down those ideas as quickly as possible, and as you said before, not worry too much about tones and plugins and effects, and you can kind of have them in your back of your mind. But if you don't get the idea down on paper ASAP, most of the time after those few minutes, they're gone. The initial inspiration is gone. Yeah,
there's a writing mindset, there's a producing mindset, and there's a mixing mindset. When you're writing, literally, it's just I'm picking up whatever instrument it may be, could even be vocals, and you're just humming melodies, no words, no syllables. You're not thinking, but you're just like, this melody is in my head, and you're just like, and you just fucking go off that way. Or if it's guitar, you just start playing notes, and you're not thinking about BPM, you're not thinking about tuning. Like we've written songs in B, and they've ended up being in drop E by the end of it. We're like, let's play this in drop E, and I'll just drop tune my guitar. And I'm like, whoa, even happened with our latest song, which I cannot say the name of, but we dropped it down 2 semitones. It's unreleased, but when you release it, you guys will be like, oh yeah, it's in drop G. It was actually originally written in A. That's just how it happens sometimes. So, definitely, but piggybacking off that, it's that flow state of just write how you feel, write what comes to you naturally. Don't worry about scales. As you can, obviously, I'll pick the open 12, open 13 a lot because that's just one of my favorite kind of like djenty kind of stuff. But I try not to get stuck there. I'm like, okay, let's move around the fretboard. Let's, try stuff, but I'm not thinking about verses. I'm not thinking about, is this the breakdown? I'm not thinking about, is this the chorus? And then usually I'll end up writing a chorus, a breakdown. I'll write this, it happens anyway, but I'm not thinking about it. I'm not putting myself in a box and going, I need to write a verse. And a verse has to be like this. It's like, it's too ruining the flow state.
That's very true. And then so once you've got your your sort of ideas down and you've got it as far as you possibly can in that first initial, I guess, go at it, you might come back to it another time and add little bits to it or whatever. But then you also might send it off to me or to Brody now as well. So we can go backwards and forwards and go, hey, I really like this bit. I don't like that bit. What if it transitioned into a verse here or a bridge, whatever. And we go backwards and forwards and just make little changes like that and adjust the song structure.
Yeah.
Based on, I guess, what we all collectively think might be the best for the song. And that's, again, where it comes up. You can't be too tied down to ideas because you're going to offer up, everyone's going to have ideas, but we can't use them all. So some are going to have to die off, even if they are good ideas.
And not worrying about the tone and stuff as well, and not worrying about what synth is he using and what drum kit is that, what snare is that. Like, that completely comes later. So that'll come in what I call the producing phase, and then you have mixing phase after that. So I don't double track guitars either when I'm doing ideas, because what's the point? It's very likely that the idea is going to change, that the riff is going to change. I might keep 80% of the riff, and then there might only be 20% of the riff that ends up being, something else. Like, it ends up, Brody might grab my riff and go, oh, what if we did this part of here? I did a dissonant over here. And I'm like, oh, cool. If I double track that, I've just double handled the song unnecessarily when it doesn't need to be.
Very good point.
So I just single track the guitars, I'll single track the bass or single MIDI the bass. And then I think it's also important that we have skill sets that can kind of overlap into each other's territory. Like, I'm no drummer by any means, but I can write some pretty decent drum
MIDI.
Yeah. Drum beats, I don't know.
Yeah, beats.
And I've actually done like one or two fills, and I'm like, that's a really cool fill. Not a complete fluke, but that fluke that's in, at the moment it's called The Right Direction, but I don't know what the song's going to be called when it's finished, but the project file is called The Right Direction, and it's like
it works really well.
Anyway, so overlapping skills, and Jordan knows enough about guitar that he can write, if he's writing a drum idea or something, like, you can kind of write a basic MIDI guitar and go, then give it to us, and we can hear what he's trying to do, and then we can then take our skill set of the niche that we're in, or the little, genre part that we're in, and we can take it and go on with it. And I want to also speak about, this is how I write songs, but there's also a way that Jordan writes songs, and they're so different to each other, but they still end up coming together and sounding like a Distorted View song, which is a really cool way of writing as well. If you guys are a band and all of you can write, like, all of you have the ability to write, if you actually, all of you start songs in your own way, you'll find that you'll write very unique stuff because you all have a different way of starting the song point.
That's true. Because I might start with a cinematic synthscape or something, and that's where I get my inspiration from, and that's not where you might have started. But you can then go from that and write a sick riff that matches with it, and then all of a sudden we've got something really unique.
Like, a lot of your ideas, you'll start with painting the scene. Like, you really set the tone of the song, and you set you almost start your song from the midpoint, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I would have the whole song start because you want to be get people's attention really early. I'm not a personal fan of songs starting with the really long soundscapes at the beginning.
Yeah, true.
I feel like they should, right in the middle of the song comes down into that soundscape, and then it builds back up. That's what grabs people's attention.
It's certainly better these days, especially with the first few seconds you hear a song. It's like, do I like it or not? And then
because people would just go skip.
Yeah, and it's
people, the TikToks, the freaking this and that, everyone's just like,
yeah. So that's probably the only thing that we might pander to in terms of the writing for other people and writing for your audience, is because these days we have to be aware that people are only listening to the first few things of a song. So unless you're doing an album where it's a bit of a deeper cut and you've got fans that will come in and listen to all the album and stuff like this, it's better if you've got a single to start strong and make an impact from the beginning.
And it doesn't mean you need to play it live like that either. Like, when we play live, we're starting with that soundscape. That's the coolest place to start a song, because we would have just ended a song really strongly. Then it's going to transition into that soundscape anyway. So in a live setting, it's a bit different. We're just talking in the record while you're trying to get people's attention, and it doesn't mean you can't have it. It's just picking your spot I suppose, and that's all in the production phase of just finding it. But yeah, when you write, you'll add all these effects and sound effects and white noise swells and sound effects of like with the I don't want to give too much away, but that other idea you did, with all of the. I don't know if I should spoil. I won't spoil it.
You can say it.
Like the going underwater and stuff, and like the song feels like it's just been ducked under, like literally, like the sound effects he's put in, it makes the song sound like it's been like you've been
dragged underwater.
You ever have like someone filming a video or something, and then they put the camera on the water, and you hear that sound?
Yeah.
It's like the song sounds like it does that. It's really cool. And then we just got to write riffs and stuff to it. But that's a completely different style of writing, and then we add guitars and vocals and everything else to that. But when I write, I just start straight with like, what's a sick riff, like riff soup. I'll just play the guitar for 10, 15 minutes, and I'll just do all this different genty, different melodies, different whatever, different notes, and then single track it all the way through. So that's a good way to just get the ideas on paper, and just understanding that the start of the song is not the finished product. You don't need to take it so seriously until you get to the point where everyone in the band has sat down, listened to the scratch pad version of the song, the draft version of the song. No dual guitars, no multiple vocal layers. Like, let the song sound like crap. It's allowed to. Like,
it's a demo.
It's a demo. You're just going, okay, yep, I can hear the direction of where this is going. And then at that point, you can go, okay, now we've all agreed that we like the song and we want to, start doing it properly. So when you get into actually tracking the song, all you need is your guitar, obviously your jack lead, and an audio interface. Now, I would recommend, if you have a cheap audio interface, to use a DI box, because it will essentially flatten that sound or level out that sound to like a level that the audio interface can read, so it's not coming in the audio interface really hot. So if you have, most people have the Scarlett, the old Scarlett I2Is or 2i2s or whatever they're called.
Yeah, basic one.
They're fine. But if you use a DI box, especially when using bass or active pickups, because they just come in hot, man. That signal is really, really hot. And they can also pick up a lot of interference. So you have a lot of mobile phones, laptops, studio monitors, internet routers, all sorts of things around the house that are very close to you. You can actually introduce a lot of humming and a lot of other frequencies and pickup. And most of these go over people's heads because you can't hear them all that well when you're just doing the normal stems. It's once you
Especially with a distorted tone on it.
Exactly. Once you start raising the noise floor and mixing, and people are trying to lessen the dynamic range to make everything nice and punchy and boosty and up front, once you're adding limiters and you're raising the noise floor and compressors and all these things, you're going to make all of those little quiet sounds that you couldn't hear before really, really loud and really obvious, and the take's actually unusable. And it's one of the most annoying things as a mixing engineer when I get clients of mine send me their stems or multi-tracks, whatever you want to call it. And it's massive in my rap stuff. Like, people just record raps, and I can hear cars in the background, birds tweeting. I can hear lots of reverb because they've just recorded it in like the middle of their room. And, it's amateur, like, rappers, like, nothing against them, but they're just, they're not pros or anything. So they don't know this stuff, which is why we do the podcast. And that's why we try to, like,
that's why we're
teach.
sort of getting this. Yeah. So, like, in terms of like when you're doing like finalizing the demo and stuff, like all of, like you said, you just need the basic way of recording a guitar into your computer, which we'll go through a little bit more of that detail in a second. In terms of like writing MIDI drums, there's plenty of free drum libraries or samples or whatever it is that you need to be able to write out a basic drum MIDI pattern. You don't have to be able to record straight away. It's better for your writing flow to have a VST that you can just drag in and write some drums to. And as Cam said, you don't need to worry about the sounds just yet. Just get a beat down, something like that. Same with the vocals. You could do it into your phone if that's the way that you want to get your ideas down.
Which we've done.
Yeah. You could just be in the car and then thinking the idea and singing along to the instrumental, whatever it is, just to get those ideas down. I think also, like you were saying as well, when we're finalizing the demo, the production hat kind of comes on a little bit, where we're thinking, okay, like the ideas are there, the riffs are there, the lyrics, the patterns, whatever. It's in the right order. It's got the right structure. how can we like sort of dress it up a little bit to make more impactful sections, and whether that's adding in white noise sweeps or synths and pad layers to fill it out, whatever it is.
Normally it's called post-production, and it's usually done by the mixing engineer, like after the person's after the band sent it. However, there's no reason why you guys can't learn it and do it beforehand, because the less work the mixing engineer needs to do and the better quality stems you can give them, and with all of the post-production done, pre-production, I suppose you call it now, then he or she can just go straight into, now I'm just going to go compression, EQ, side chaining, and they can just make the song sound all balanced and full and mastered, as opposed to spending a lot of time chopping up your vocal and putting it in time. And that's another thing. If you finish what you're saying, or did I interrupt you?
Yeah, no, that's it. Basically, we can go on to, let's go through the recording stuff.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about vocals first, we can do that.
Yeah. So like, let's say, from the first part of the podcast, we've outlined all that. So like, we've got the draft track. It's all scratched up.
Yeah.
Everyone's happy with it. Now we want to actually record it.
Is this recording from home, like how we do it?
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about everything from Distorted Views' standpoint, because that's where we're knowledgeable and that's where we can actually speak upon. And then from you guys, a listener, just take what we say and apply it to your own studio, and we'll come up with some extra solutions to people that don't have crazy. Well,
basically, if you're paying for a studio, you're probably paying for a sound engineer as well, and they're gonna set up most of this for you. That's their job.
Yeah. So that's another thing. So you can either pay for that, you can pay to go to a studio to record, and you can use all their gear, and they're going to monitor your input levels, and they're going to, but that is the most expensive way of doing it. So I want to talk about a way that you guys do it at home, and you just send your multi-tracks to a mixing engineer, and you can save a lot of money, because then you'll only have to pay probably $300 to $500 to get it mixed. And that's, if someone's charging $300 to $500 for a mix, they should be doing a good job.
Yeah,
should be.
Absolutely.
So if you're doing vocals, very important to be in time. Use a metronome. So many people can we talk about this for a second? So I fucking hate this. So I don't understand how many people, like there's a lot of people, they think using a metronome is somehow like a beginner, like it's you just don't know how to be in time. And it's like, we can easily play in time without a metronome. It's got nothing to do with we need it to stay in time. It's an instrument that a sound profile that can literally help you have impeccable timing. If you're already good and you're already in time without one, having one is only going to make you even better.
Yeah.
You're going to be even more perfect. And that when you're lining, like I can't stand when bands say we don't play to a metronome because we're just so good. And it's like,
I understand the natural want for a push and pull type of feel in the tempo if you want to be able to move things around.
You're going to get that with human feel anyway.
You're
like
gonna get that.
I don't play like a robot because there's a metronome on. Like I don't go, I am perfectly in time. I still have a bit of swing, a bit of head bob to it. But long story short, don't listen to anyone influencing you about anything. Just make up your own mind with it. I like metronomes because if you have a metronome in your ear while you're listening to the song and your head banging to the groove, that metronome is going to help your vocal be really in time.
You've got something to lock into.
Exactly. And you tap your foot and you just have this constant motion that, it's massive with rap. If you can rap with a metronome and you have all these sporadic like syllable placements, you can just, what word is going to fall on that click, like one of our lyrics is like, ain't no way I'm ever going to let anybody tell me that I'm never going to win. Right. So, ain't no way I'm ever gonna let anybody tell me that I'm never gonna win. Like it's like da 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 da.
You have to hit these certain accents in time. Yeah,
and it helps having that metronome going click, 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 click. I'm timing the word up with the click, and it makes me. And no way I'm ever gonna let anybody tell me that I'm never gonna win. And it's like I can go da 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 and act like I'm sporadically rapping, but it's very easy to do. It sounds really impressive, but it's not.
It's the same with the drums and everything. Like you just can lock in better, and you're able to give something to groove to. If you have the drums already recorded and they're in time to a metronome, then you can use that. It helps you groove a little bit more. But often you don't have drums in that part or whatever it may be. So
it's less quantizing you got to do. do. It's it's less the mixing engineer, because the amount of rappers that I get, I'm sorry I have to keep going at rap, but it's just that's most of the mixing work I do is in hip hop. So a lot of the rappers I get, they will speed up and then slow down and then speed up and then slow down. They don't realize they're doing this, and then they find themselves getting ahead of the beat, so they start rapping slower to come back onto the beat, and then they rap too slow, and then they kind of speed up the lyrics, and then you don't notice it as much when the song's playing, but when you mute the song and you just listen to a metronome, they're just so out of time. And if you listen to somebody who knows the lyrics and isn't reading their phone and, reading the lyrics off their phone, and they actually know them up here, which is another massive tip. I think we said that on the last podcast.
Yeah.
It's going to help you lock into that beat and lock into that rhythm, mainly the rhythm of what you're trying to do. It doesn't make you robotic or boring. Like, you have this rhythm of syllables that you're hitting, and then when you do it in that applicable timing, you can just drag and drop that stem, and it's already in time. It's with the human error, natural human swing and give and take. That's what you want. We're not trying to be artificial and but it's less work the mixing engineer needs to do. And now, it's just he can go straight to the making you sound good part.
Yeah, that's true. So timing for is a big one for every single part of the recording. So having
especially
a metronome,
in layers.
Yeah, so making sure everything's in time. A second one is tuning, making sure everything's in tune. And whether you want new strings on your bass and your guitar and stuff, that definitely adds a lot. The other thing I was going to say is that, like, it goes without saying that you need to know your parts before recording them. Like you just said, if you're reading off a page, if you don't know your part, you're not going to come off with a convincing performance.
No.
And it's not going to translate to the song.
Yeah, you need to know what the song is about, even if you're the guitar player. If it's an angry song, play the guitar like you're angry.
Yeah.
Pick it aggressively. And like what Jordan said, if you can afford new strings, get new strings before you record. I usually tend to try and wait until we have like 2 or 3 songs to do, and then I'll track all of them in the one day, and then that way I get the most out of while the strings are sounding their best, like when I'm doing the actual tracking, like for the end song. Because I got a home loan and a kid to look after and everything. I can't buy strings every single week. It's just I can't afford it. So I try to make the most of it. Like, okay, cool, I got some spare money, buy some new strings for both my guitars, and then I go and do the recording when they're fresh. There's that. There's also, like I said before, with the humming and the backup noise, especially with active pickups. I've noticed with active pickups, they pick up so much more. Even with distortion, when you move your hands around the fretboard, you get this with basses a lot. It was in one of our new stems on one of our new songs. Every time you move your hand around the bass, it's like you get all that string noise and stuff. So you can buy these fret wraps, which is what I use. They kind of help as well. You can also mute strings that you're not currently playing. I've seen people do it with tape. I've seen people do it with a sock, like cloth. It doesn't really matter. If you're only using one string in that section, then just mute your other strings, and then you can really jam that string out. And you're not going to get any of the, because like what we said before, it's these little vibrations that you might not notice in the raw takes, and you might listen to it back and go, yeah, that sounds good. And then as soon as you add distortion and raise the noise floor, I've got all of this string noise. You can hear my fingers moving across the fretboard, and it's really distracting in the takes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
gotta
really
remember
is.
that as well.
Yeah, that's kind of like all of these things, understanding the quality of the sound that you're going for. So if we're talking guitars and things like this, I think it's really important to have as close as you can to a final distorted tone when you're actually tracking, so you can hear how the little nuances in your playing come out under distortion. If you're just playing and hearing DI, or you've got a really basic amp sim that's not going to be anywhere close to the final result, you might have all of these discrepancies in your playing, or play it differently because it sounds different. Obviously, I don't track guitars myself, but we've had this in our experience where, if you really dig into a note under a certain tone and distortion, you can really hear that it brings out this certain quality that we're going for. Whether it's a palm mute or something, or a pinch harmonic, you need to be able to hear what you're playing to dig in. So do you want to just go through quickly a basic
Signal chain.
Yeah, signal chain from start to finish.
So that would be another reason you can get a DI to use a DI box as well, because a DI box most of the time have a split output. So they'll grab your DI of your guitar and they'll split it into two outputs that are equal to each other.
Yeah, DI is the signal that comes straight out the guitar. For those that don't know, direct
input. Correct. So if you use a DI box, your XLR side can go straight to your audio interface, and then that's what you actually record. That way you have the ability to reamp it later, as you have the ability to actually treat the DI, which is really good if you're using a cheaper guitar like most of us are. My guitar had cost me $300, and brand new they're like $700. So it's like a $700 guitar if I was to buy it off the shelf. Ibanez something, SE something, I don't know.
Yeah.
So not the most expensive guitar, right? It's pretty entry level, to be honest. But it sounds really good. Like, it sounds great. The pickups are awesome in it. You put new strings in it and it's good to go. So pretty much you want to have the DI be able to be treated so that way you can mess with the transient. Oh, sorry, I'm getting into mixing now. Okay, you want to give the mixing engineer the ability to treat your DI before it hits the amp block if they want to do so. But then the other side, the other duplicate parallel that comes out of the DI box, you can run that into your real amp and real cab. If most people run real amps and real cabs that don't want to learn all the mixing and production stuff, they just hey, I went to Manny's and I bought this amp and cab, I brought a combo and that's just what I want to hear. That's completely fine. Some of those little combo amps sound really good. So that's your other end. You just go jack to jack, you plug it in, and when you're playing, that's what you're hearing with zero latency. You're hearing the distorted tone, but your computer's recording the DI. And that's what I would send to the mixing engineer, and you would obviously dual track it or quad track it. Record it twice or record it 4 times, and just make sure your playing's really tight to a metronome. It's less chopping up and, messing around the mixing engineer needs to do. Again, making it better, faster for them to get results, and they'll probably charge you less money because they didn't have to work as hard on the song.
Yeah, and if you want to see all of this in action, you've got a video out on our YouTube channel about how to digitally record guitars.
Yeah, we got a bunch of them. So just you go on our YouTube channel, Distorted Views Band, or just if you just type in Distorted Views on YouTube, it'll come up. Because
you can see it, actually see what you're doing and how you're running it through Axe Effects and things like this, because it's hard to describe the detail and things like this, but we're just sort of giving you little tips and things to remember. When you're recording the DI, like you said, try and stay away from any interference. Try and play as tight as you can. Try and get all your takes to sound cohesive as much as possible, and then
you want to move back from your computer. So you don't want to be recording right next to the monitors and right next to the screen and stuff. You want to take a nice big step back or roll back on your chair if you're playing on a chair, and out of that audio, out of your DI box, that goes into an audio interface. Try and get a more expensive audio interface because it'll have more headroom. And I suppose if you have a DI box, it doesn't really matter. But if you're not using a DI box, you're going to need the headroom.
There's less chances for error with a better quality gear.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, and then that audio interface goes into your computer, and then you just use whatever DAW you've got: FL Studio, Ableton, Pro Tools, whatever it may be, Logic. And then you just literally record it straight from there. So that's your guitar's pretty much done.
You can do the same for bass, right?
Bass is pretty much the exact same, except you do not dual track bass. You don't need to. So one bass will be it's a mono instrument, so it'll be nice down the center. However, in mixing, we'll probably duplicate the bass signal and treat them differently. But again, that's more mixing. Just one recording for the bass is all you need. I've never heard of anyone dual tracking bass.
No.
And then it's all those things, guys. And then you just use an amp sim. That's good enough. If you're using an amp sim, that's good enough. That gives you a nice distorted tone. Or if you're using a real amp in person, you can use that.
You can also give the mix engineer some reference tones as well, because they can also, like Cam was saying, if they get given the DI, they've got probably loads of great gear that they can reamp in the studio, and they know what they're listening for. They can curate the tone. It's something to get good at if you're a guitarist. I think I would advise trying to learn all this stuff anyway, but if you are sending it off to a mix engineer, they can match it to some tones that you give them for reference and all of this type of thing, and try and get it as close to the sound that you want. That's guitars and bass.
Vocals are pretty much the same in regards to, I would recommend using a preamp with vocals. So if you do have a mic set up at home and you're not we're talking the cheap version,
Mm-hmm.
then getting a good microphone's really good.
Yeah, so because there's obviously dynamic and condenser.
I think condensers mic are better for the studios, right?
So I would probably like an all-rounder mic that can do everything is probably a good condenser.
Yeah.
A dynamic microphone is probably slightly better for really loud
Yeah, it's
screams
more
and things.
I suppose I'd go condenser for most of the time. They're condensers for vocals anyway.
Yeah.
So you if you can get it, I think there's a decent one for like $300 or $400. The Rode NT1A, I think, it's a very nice, just
clean, good.
It's just a nice mic for the price tag. And then if you can get, I don't think that one needs a preamp, but the one that I use goes into a preamp, and the preamp really does add some really nice color and some kind of extra saturation or subtle harmonics.
So it helps boost the signal, is that right?
Yeah, it introduces extra sub-harmonics and stuff to the sound. So when it gets processed later, it just sounds clearer, and it has more, it almost reacts to your plugins in a better way, if that makes sense. Like I notice when I compress it and saturate it, the takes that have gone through the preamp sound better, even with the exact same plugins doing the exact same thing. It goes back to getting it better at the source.
Yeah,
like the better you can get, the better starting point you can get, the better it's going to be. But you don't need it. If you're just running, just get a decent mic. You want a little bit of room acoustics. You just don't want echo. So if you have tiles or something, or floorboards,
no
good.
showers, no kitchens.
No showers, no kitchens. And if you're in your bedroom, if you got like tiles in your bedroom, or you got like wooden floorboards, probably not going to be your best option. If you have to do it in your bedroom, try and throw like a rug down, like a really big rug, and you can get the cheap acoustic padding that doesn't cost much, and just put that behind the microphone and kind of around the traps, the bass traps in the corners of your room. That's going to help. It's not going to do a lot, but it's going to help.
Just takes away that general like sibilance, or like the S's, like it just dampens all of those kind of little echoes and flutters.
But people get confused with, I need like a booth, and then they usually go into their cupboard or their wardrobe, but that sounds way too boxy, and they usually have a lot of clothes in there, and they think, oh, it's dampening the sound. Yeah, but it's dampening the sound too much. You still want
kind of makes you go like go underwater, or really under a towel or something.
Yeah, that's right. And you really want some kind of room acoustic in the vocal. It's actually going to help the vocal. You just don't want too much of that, and you don't want any fizzing, humming, any interference, any...
So having like a fan on in the background, or aircon or something, or someone's typing away on a keyboard or whatever.
Yeah, so you just want it to be as quiet as possible, and, don't go right up to the mic like this. To kind of have a bit of gap between you and the mic, and then have the gain as low as you can get it, that it's still picking up your voice, but it's not picking up much past that as well, because I've noticed that people will have the gain either too low, and it barely picks them up at all, or they try to get the waveform really thick on their DAW, and they go, oh, when the gain's up really high, I can see my waveform, it's really thick, and it's like it's but then you're picking up way too much sound, and you can literally hear them move their hand and touch their pants or their keys,
like sniff or something.
Yeah, I'll go something like that, and you can just hear what it's like. Dude, you don't need. And then I'm gonna add compression and add all these effects to that. It's just you're just gonna make it way worse. So just keep all those things in mind if you are recording at home. But I would say the timing and lining up your layers so that you're, in the best amount of timing as possible is going to save the mixing engineer so much more time. And it's also going to make you really good to work with. So they're most likely going to give you a discount because like, oh, I mixed this song in like a couple hours, as opposed to having to because that stuff is tedious, man, like chopping up and dragging.
Getting all the S's and the T's and all the like little transients of your voice over multiple layers to line up exactly so that you don't have this sprayed out effect or like crowd sound.
And knowing the song too, goes beyond just knowing the lyrics and being able to perform them and knowing what the song is about in regards to what is the emotional connection to the song. It goes even further to knowing when you're going to stop a sound, especially in heavy metal when you're screaming. It's really annoying if you're meant to go like, ah, and then you're meant to stop on on the fourth click, and then it's like and then the second's like and then another one's like And it's like, it doesn't even make it. Like, and you have all these layers that have like
coming in and out at different times.
Yeah, like you just have like your left side of your ear is like the scream's just stopped and the right side is still going. And then the one that's mono is like, as finishes at a different time. And I was like, you got all these different vocals that are just, if you know the scream starts at the start of the beat and it ends on beat 4, then like finish the scream at the same time.
Because we're aiming to get those layers to sound like one cohesive voice, basically, even though it is a fuller version and a bigger version with multiple different sounds on it. It still needs to sound like one big layer that's together.
Yeah, I like to try and make vocals sound, unless it's the chorus where you want it to be, harmonized, and then what you want it to sound like a crowd of people, or like the one vocalist has been split into 4 versions of himself and he's singing high and low and everything else. For the most part, you want the vocal to essentially sound like it's just you doing a one take. Which is why Justin on the last podcast was so passionate about having less stems, because he's like, it makes him sound like it's just him performing, and he really tries to get that performance of the song and his stuff, and he only has like 3 stems out of the entire thing. So, those things are really important to keep in mind as well for, making sure your multi-tracks are all up to standard, very well timed without any editing, and no interference, no humming, and you got new strings on your guitars, your basses. You're warmed up beforehand. You know the song. You know the emotional connection. You know the syllables and the placement and where you're supposed to start, where you're supposed to end, instead of kind of just winging it.
And then being in tune as well. Obviously, we can use plugins like auto-tune and stuff, but when you're doing it live, you want to be able to hit the actual thing. So I think there's a good chance to talk about that song again that we're currently writing. We pitched down to semitones because the vocal performance wasn't able to be done to the highest standard at that key. So we dropped the key.
They could hit the notes, but it was, at the top of their range. So, when you're singing in the top of your register before your voice breaks in a head voice and falsetto and stuff, like you have a chest voice of what, we're right at that peak. So we're like, let's just drop the song 2 semitones and go down and drop G, and then that way the vocalist that was performing that section.
It's more comfortable and it's more like,
you can be sung without strain, sung without squeezing and like belting to have the breath support to hit the note, and also the riff sounded really cool in drop G, so it kind of worked.
Yeah, so that's something to consider, that you can always do that if it's not quite in reach and all of that kind of thing.
Yep.
Drums. When recording drums, like I'll do 2 different scenarios. We've got our version, which we currently use sample drums. So I take the VST that we use and I will pick the right kinds of samples. Again, I've got videos of this on our YouTube channel about how to get the MIDI to sound from start to finish from a good human drum performance. So it makes it sound like someone's actually played the drums and you're not playing this robotic sample-based drums that are all sounding the exact same.
And you make sure that you can actually play the drums on a real drum kit before he puts it in the song. That's a big one too.
Yeah, because you don't want to be able to go up on stage and then you can't play what you've written.
People hear MIDI and they kind of cringe too. That's another thing that's a little bit annoying and a pet peeve of mine. It's like, MIDI doesn't need to be, frowned upon. Like, oh, why would you not want to play it? It's like, dude, because it's expensive, man. And a lot of us have home loans and families to pay for and bills to pay. And we can't all just we're not signed to a label getting in tons of debt, which is not always a good thing.
Exactly. We're making music and we want the music to sound good. And we're lucky that there are some amazing technologies out there that allow us to create songs that sound good with sampled drums. It doesn't mean that we're cheating, because I'd quite happily go and record drums every week if I could afford it. But we need to be able to use what we can at our disposal. So
you just got to have the discipline to not take the piss and write something that you can't actually play in real life, and have that pride in I would say pride in yourself and no ego, being like, no, I can't play this in real life, so I'm not going to put in the song. Like, so that's what is a really good point to make as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I will go through all of the MIDI and kind of act like I'm playing it, whether you can actually sometimes, use MIDI keyboards and tap some of these things in so it comes in with this natural dynamic and variation in your notes. But I'll go in and slide notes left and right to make sure they're slightly off the grid and they've got the feel that I want. Change the velocity so the snare drum's not the exact same hit every single time, because, there are some drummers that are that good, but I'm not that good. So we need to make sure that it's still sounding like a human has played it.
You
Then
also use samples that you have in real life too, don't you? Like there's the symbols you actually have in real life. You have a sample version of that exact symbol.
Yeah,
don't you?
that's a very good point. Yeah, so I've found symbols that I like and sounds that I like to create what my drum kit would sound like as well if it was recorded. If you so that's that. You can go onto the YouTube and watch those as to how we get them done. But the samples are there pretty much out of the box. They sound great. So you just need to write the MIDI sounding as human as possible, and then you might render out the individual parts to send off to mixing, and the mix engineer can do the rest. If you are recording drums, I'll go through a basic kind of how you would record that. If you're going to a studio, they're going to have the kit set up, or at least help you set up all of the microphone placement. It's important to have the majority of your main pieces, like your kick, your snare drum, even your toms and things, as directly mic'd up. So they might have a microphone directly on each piece. You sometimes have a bottom microphone, not just the top head. You might have one on the bottom, or two different kick mics, one in front of the kick and one inside it. We also have overheads, so that captures all the cymbals. There's often two overhead microphones split sort of evenly across the kit. And then we have a room mic, which might be positioned a bit further away in front of the kit to give it that ambience and things like that. So most studios will have a room sound. They'll have a drum room. They'll have these kits set up. But it's important to know that these are the types of microphones that you need and the sounds you're going to be capturing. Now, when you get your raw tracks, if you've gone to you might just hire a studio or a drum room to record and then get those multi-tracks back yourself and just kind of then organize them for mixing. You'll have all of these all of these layers. And one thing that we can talk about, because we've been doing a bit of it lately, is talking about phase. And when you've got multiple drum microphones recording the same kit, you're going to get a lot of bleed between the microphones.
And phase cancellation too. Like some mics are closer, some mics are further away. So the distance the sound has to travel to the mic can make the waveforms shift. And so then they phase cancel. This is more going into mixing, but if you can learn about phase cancellation and stuff in your own mixing and stuff, it's very important that you need to identify that, because if drums are out of phase, they will sound like shit.
Yeah, that's right. So just maybe look into sort of phase a little bit. We won't go too deep into it, but it's important to remember. And as you said, Cam, like having the different times that it takes for the sounds to travel into the microphone, you're going to get bleed between them. So if you're hitting the snare drum, you're going to get a really nice loud waveform on the snare direct mic. But say Tom 1 or the overheads, you're going to get that sound slightly later and obviously quieter. Now, what we can use are gates, and sometimes they're often done already when you're recording. But if you're doing it and you're setting it up from home, it's a good idea to put a gate on each channel. And what a gate is that it's simply, once the sound reaches a certain threshold, it opens up and will record the sound. And then once the volume passes back below the threshold, it'll close again. So then, say if you're hitting the snare, it's only going to open up for that snare hit and then close afterwards. And then most of the other stuff will be muted for the main majority of it.
I've actually been using gates a lot on vocals lately. And when I pre-process a vocal before I start the mixing process, so this can fall under pre-mixing, is I drag and drop it into my audio treatment plugin, I suppose you would call it, because it auto records as well, but you can also treat the audio, and you can highlight a section of the audio that isn't you performing. It's in between, so you find a gap between when you as the vocalist are quiet, and then you can acquire a noise profile of the room, and it'll boost the noise floor, and it'll grab everything, any kind of audio that's happening. So if you have any kind of like really quiet in the background, it'll acquire those frequencies and it'll just like get rid of them that aren't clashing with the vocal. And it does an amazing job of making the vocal sound really upfront, because the vocal will come up really loud and really upfront in your face, and then in between those breaths and in between those things, it'll just cut off.
Yeah, disappear.
Yeah, it's like an R&B hip hop trick. It's used a lot to make the vocals like come in very strongly, but then when they go away, there's no more of that original take. It's almost like you're like, and it saves you having the chop, 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 and like manually fade in, manually fade out everything as well. So that's a cool thing you could do to your vocals before you send it off to mixing as well.
Yeah, all of these tips are just mainly to get a quality sound like as clean as possible, because when everything, like you said before, is boosted and made loud up for mastering to a full volume, you're going to get all of these little tiny bits of crap that basically come in through, like, come into the recordings, and they make themselves obvious and they can ruin recordings. So we're basically trying to filter out all the crap as much as we can.
You want to minimize as much of it as you can. It's going to happen. You're going to get, like, when you're raising the noise floor and boosting everything into the compressors to like make it loud and full and stuff, you're going to get other sounds that are going to, arise essentially. So we're just trying to minimize as much of that as possible. The biggest one that you absolutely need to do are the vocals, the background noise of the vocals, not having fans on or a window open and cars driving past, things like that. And then also having the sound of your fingers playing the guitar or the sound of your fingers playing the bass. If your hand is moving around the strings and you can just hear like, the E string like resonating when you're not even playing it. It's just your hands moved across and then like this part of your palm has accidentally hit it and now it's just going and it's just ringing. It makes your riff sound so muddy, and especially in heavy metal because you're adding all this distortion, you're adding a drive pedal, you're boosting the sound into the amp block. So you're just making all of those ugly sounds even. It's essentially like you're trying to get the cleanest possible take and the cleanest possible tone, and then making it distorted and making it ugly, if that makes sense. Because metal is that distorted, ugly, heavy sound. But if you want to use the least amount of gain as possible, like I do this in my guitar tutorials as well. If you go on YouTube, you'll see me making a heavy metal tone from scratch. The gain's on about 2. Yeah. 2 or 3 out of 10, I think. So like you can, but like it gets to the point where you boost the gain so much, it just sounds like a woofy, muddy.
Yeah, you lose the clarity of the note.
Yeah, so it's like my gain's only on 2, like, but I'm just driving that distorted signal so hot into the amp that it only needs to be 2, and then you have a really nice distorted sound but less gain. So that's kind of like a way of thinking about it. It's like I'm just trying to get a nice clean take with less interference, less mud. If that string's not meant to be played, don't have it ringing or resonating or anything. And that's going to help you a lot with the end process of your songs as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess that's all the sort of the live elements. We can touch on the effects and synths and stuff briefly. If that's relevant to you. I think more and more bands are starting to use these things now. And like you said, it could also be done by the producer or the mix engineer or whoever's doing this.
That's also giving creative control to somebody else. And some bands don't want that. Some bands are like, this is the song, we like it like this. So.
And like, as we said, there is so many resources out there for sounds and samples that you can use to add to your music to then give to somebody to kind of add to your song. So I thought about kind of running through a couple of ones that are really good. The first one being like white noise. So adding sweeps and sort of explosion hits, or like where it's just like, or it's like sort of sweeps up to a note or something. It just adds a bit of transition, so you're transitioning between sections easier. Another thing, obviously, that we spoke about before was adding like pads and various different kind of like synth lines that will fill out a song that are not quite the same as lead guitar, but it's like an extra element that can make the song sound really big and full and actually, add to it in that way. All of these things that you're doing, you can do this really cleanly because the samples are clean. The synths are often really clean if you're getting a decent synth, and everything comes in nice and hot. So you're basically, whatever you get is going to sound pretty good from the start anyway. Once you give it to the mix engineer, they can then fit that into the track and make it work with everything else. But
and you can always give them MIDI as well. So
exactly.
If you don't have any expensive VSTs, you're like, I don't have any, I don't have Serum. I think Vital's free actually. Yeah. There you go, Vital. But there's free ones, and then you can come up with like a bunch of presets. You don't have to know how about oscillators and freaking modulation and all that stuff. You don't need to learn about any of that. You can just be like presets. Go, oh, that's a cool sound. Give them the MIDI and say like, I want these chords in there as well, and then it just sits under your live playing and the real instruments. The real instruments will always take, not with our music because we're deliberately trying to show off the synths. Like that's kind of our X factor. Like we want the synths to be up front. But for other people, it's more of a subtle, you're still listening to the live instruments, the live bass, the live drums, the live vocals, but the synth will just help hold the body and the key of the song as well. You can just be a pad that just plays one chord and it doesn't even move. But it's just this, that just fucking sits underneath all of everything else.
There's ways to also trigger all of these things live. So we have gone through that, but it's like having these extra elements really help. And you can use things like explosions, 808s, big sub drops to add emphasis to breakdowns, or siren sounds we use quite a bit, or like war horns and things that are just kind of set the tone in the scene for what it might sound like.
Yeah, especially on the newer stuff.
Yeah,
robot voices that we've been doing a lot.
Yeah, we do like the old AI voice. One thing that I've learned from the EDM world is to add in this atmosphere layer to the entire track. Now, you can go kind of, you can go hard with this or not, but there's like, say for example, we've all heard these long nature soundscapes where you've got like rain music or like the sounds of kind of wind and ocean that are in the background and stuff. So you don't necessarily have to grab crashing waves and run that under your whole song, but like just this kind of like staticky noise, maybe like a little bit of I don't know, like a humming or like this streetcars going past in the background. If you do this really, really quiet so that it's inaudible under your song, it puts the song as a whole in an environment. And what that can do is give you this sense of space, and it gives this like you would add a reverb to an entire track to make it sound like it's been played in the same room.
Which people do. Yeah, they add reverb to a master, which I personally am like,
no, I'm not keen on that. But
I've seen people pull it off.
Yeah, it does. But that's the thing. That's what I'm getting at, is it puts it in a space. It puts it in a physical environment where everything sounds cohesive. So rather than putting a reverb on the master, I try and add what I would call like an environment to the song. So it's like this very subtle noise and occasional wind or thunder or whatever it might be that you want to set the tone for, just going across the whole song. So play around with that. That might also add an extra element to your songs.
I think there's a tutorial on YouTube I have on our channel where I just added the sound of like someone dropping a book in like a freaking really big church or something. It was just like, and then I copied and pasted it, duplicated it, and then I flipped the second one in reverse. So it was like, and I just copied, paste, cut the whole entire track. And then I go through, it's on our YouTube channel as well. I think it's like 3 ways to make metal sound better or something like that. It's the title, something along like that. But then when I mute it and I take it out, you realize how much it's adding to the song. It's like it adds this Darth Vader breathy kind of element. And even though it's quiet and you wouldn't notice it on your first listen, when I unmute it and I put it back in the track, you're like, oh, it's really... Because the way it was timing in, it was like as it was fading in, the track was like building up, and then it'd be like boom, and it would end on the first count. It would start on the first count when the guitars come in again, and it's like this kind of like waviness that it adds. So I would definitely agree. Like doing kind of like what would you call it? Like authentic kind of, not authentic, like organic, whatever the word is, like weird stuff. Like just doing stuff that's not.
Conventionally done, basically.
Conventionally, unconventional, whatever. I don't know. What do you know what I'm trying to use?
Yeah, well, that's right. These are all just ways to add depth and add that extra production value to your songs, because there's so many people out there competing for your listening ears and your time. So you want to give them as much as you can for each song. We just had some technical difficulties. Sorry, the audio just cut out there. But basically, yeah, we were talking about finalizing, dressing up the song, and basically adding that production value. So I reckon we can wrap up here anyway.
Yeah, I
think
can't remember what I was saying.
Yeah,
It's gone
lost
now.
the train of thought.
We lost the flow state. See,
Yes.
that's why it's important. The
Yeah.
flow state gone.
And it's important to have good gear so it doesn't get ruined halfway through. But yes, hopefully you learned something from that episode. We can talk about this for hours. We'll probably do it again soon. Drop any questions, drop anything on our socials, on YouTube, whatever you're seeing this. Ask us, get in contact, because we're always keen to talk and learn and share information. So, yeah, I think that's it. 31's done and dusted.